One of these days I'll have to try and get one of those automatic scene switchers set up. But here we are. It's a best of 5. Spawning up in the top left-hand side of the map. A lot of people are excited to see him playing once more. It is Dead Pixel's FanTaSy, the recently returned Terran player, and his opponent, the Swede, looking to get some vengeance after last week. It is SortOf. So as I mentioned before, it was a 3-2 last week for FanTaSy versus SortOf. I mean, it was a pretty standard TVZ a fair bit of the time. I mean, SortOf generally played defensive and whatnot. I think we will see FanTaSy be moving out for a push or two. It's really going to be interesting to see how these two guys are going to play against each other once more. It has been about 2 weeks since they last played, maybe a bit more if I'm not mistaken. So it will be a little bit different, but I doubt these guys are honestly thinking too much about their past series. They're just going to be thinking, all right, let's get right on into it. But they certainly will want to advance in this one. I mean, the first place prize for this is $250. I should have mentioned this before we got into this game, but these guys are competing for one of the bigger prize pools in this event. It's $500 US on the line. The players, of course, they get $20 just for showing up, but then it goes up from there. After that, well, it's going to be embarrassing if I don't know. It goes up to $50 after they advance from there, and then moving on from that, the second place locks them in at $70 and then $250. So I mean, if you just make it one round, that's like that's a nice dinner you can buy yourself. But looking at the builds from these guys, I mean, we're going to talk about the standard builds coming out, and that's what it is. It's Acid Plant. It's a fairly discovered map. FanTaSy is going for that Reaper, sort of getting the quick third hatch as the Zerg. Basically just the hatchery before the Queens is really the only way to sum that up. Then Reaper on the way up for FanTaSy, getting the Safety Marine. You can never trust your opponent in StarCraft 2, so he's going to have that. It'll help shoo away Overlords, also help defend if there was something like a cheeky ling run by. FanTaSy, though, being confident, is moving right on out with the Reaper just in case. Basically pretty sure that there's not going to be an early pool or anything to catch him off guard. Thanks to everyone for tuning on in, by the way. So that Reaper coming in, getting a bit of harassment. One Zergling gone down so far. I believe that might have... Well, he's got the second weak one at the back there, so not likely going to get too much more. The Terran tax, that Reaper tax, that just comes in, gets its little bit, and then leaves. Zergling speed is on the way for SortOf. Now we're going to see how this game moves forward. Right now we've got the Starport on the way for FanTaSy, Factory on the way. I mean, the really only main thing we can talk about this build right now is that FanTaSy is a guy who does like to go for that third CC. He's not gone for something like a 2-1-1. So that is off the table. And I mean, he is starting this tech lab, so it could be like a Hellion Banshee into mech play, or it could just be him sort of going for a opening into that eventual third CC later bio push. Sort of just looking at that production tab, he's making a lot of drones, basically the minimum to stay safe. This is what I think a Zerg player spends a lot of their time doing these days. It's trying to basically min-max it, get the minimum amount of units while being safe and getting the maximum amount of economy. But FanTaSy actually coming in here very bold with his 2 Hellions that joined up with this Reaper. Actually got a shot off on those Lings, so might force out a bit more defense from SortOf here as a Zerg player if they do undercommit to those Zerglings to defend the Hellions. I mean, it can basically just be a lot of damage done to the Zerg player if these Hellions manage to get in and just go for a run by. It looks like SortOf did make enough Lings to deter this, but FanTaSy is actually going to be going for it. However, he does have a good number of Lings with the Queens here, so this was actually a bit of an overcommitment by FanTaSy. He's running out. The 2 Hellions are actually going to go down, so it looks like nothing is going to escape that. So FanTaSy, a little bit bold here, really testing his opponent, but it did not pay off for him. Now back at FanTaSy's base, that Overlord is going down, and we are seeing that it is going to be bio. We've got that third CC on the way. Those Hellions did go down, but this is going to give SortOf a lot of free reign to go for what he wants at this point. He knows FanTaSy. Well, I believe he saw the third CC. He didn't see the third CC, but you can generally assume He saw the barracks, he saw the stim on the way, so he knows the timings, knows he's going to be relatively safe. I believe that was a Liberator that came in and got picked off. Pardon me for not catching that there, but now we've got SortOf. He's moving out on the map with his lings. He's got no real harassment to worry about. He's identified its bio, and now he's going to know the timings. He's going to know that there's going to be no significant bio force out on the map for till at least the 8-minute mark usually. Now that third CC is getting up. Eventually FanTaSy will move out and take that third base. That's where the Terran becomes a lot more vulnerable, but the Zerg generally is content to sit back for now. Hello to everyone who is indeed tuning on into this event. We've already got a lot of you guys tuning in, which is great to see for an event like this, and we've got a lot of StarCraft today, and I think a lot of people are going to be happy with the players that we have. I mean, we've got SortOf versus FanTaSy, a Terran versus Zerg, such a classic, such a good matchup, kind of the new versus the old. Then we're going to just have a series coming up which will be absolutely bananas, which is going to be Haas versus Solar. I mean, we can generally assume how that series is going to go, but you can't actually assume anything with Haas. Maybe he'll just come out in the stun us by going for a full-on macro Protoss play. And then after that, we're going to have Rainer versus Creator, which is really the old versus the new. I mean, that'll be a great one. Then after that, we are going to have Sue versus Scarlet to wrap things up, which I think will be a fantastic series just to see. I mean, both those players so good. It can really go any way. And I mean, we could really be surprised with the result. We'll just have to wait. Now, we've got FanTaSy moving out. He's got this double medivac. It's not like a full-on early commitment drop or anything like this. This is 2 medivacs moving out with Marines, but it's not a 2-1-1. It's not hitting this timing. FanTaSy's on 3 bases. This is just to really test SortOf because he can. He's got the medivacs, he's got the Marines. You really want to try and do something with it while you have this window. There's no mutas, there's no Hydras out just yet. There is a Spore Crawler in place, the Ling's in place. SortOf, one of these European Zergs is very good at defending here, which is always impressive to see. I mean, he shut those Hellions down. He hasn't really taken any damage. He lost 1 drone to that Liberator, so FanTaSy really wants to get something done. He's going to clean up some creep. Actually gets himself a Queen, possibly 2. So 2 Queens is really the first pick-off FanTaSy has gotten, which is very nice for him. It'll help delay creep. I mean, the last thing that SortOf wants to worry about, or really any Zerg player wants to worry about when they're playing StarCraft, is having to replace those Queens, because it's such a manual task. He's going to make the Queens, then eventually rally them over, get them up on the front line, spreading creep. Whereas when you already have your Queens alive, just going over to your Queens, spreading that creep is just instantaneous, as opposed to having to replace them. Now we've got these Lings pushing this drop back. The creep for SortOf, though, is absolutely insane already. I believe it's... okay, we're not going to mess around with that hotkey. I was trying to get it just all on the red, but we shall see that later. Now, looking at this, we've got another Queen going down, so FanTaSy finding some damage anywhere. Denying this creep is very nice, because that was getting uncomfortably close to his door here. So FanTaSy continuing on with these drops, finding yet another Queen there. Oh my gosh, FanTaSy just murdering these Queens to start off. SortOf gonna have to be replacing those, but while FanTaSy is getting this damage done, and it's nice, it's taxing his opponent, SortOf still is reaching this scary Zerg phase. I mean, he's got the Hydras up. Medivacs have to get out of there. And he's reaching this hive stage for Zerg. He's getting up to a 5th base. FanTaSy looking to try and deny anything that he can. He may be able to move for a drop on this base, but SortOf spreading his units well. He's got this creep up, and it looks like he is going to be replacing this creep, which he definitely needs to do, but FanTaSy has done a good job delaying this. Now we've got this Ling Hydra counterattack. There is 2 tanks in position, though, which is very good to see for FanTaSy. Supply depots will go down, but SCVs should be relatively safe. FanTaSy's army is in position to intercept this, but still 2 tanks going down, a sensor tower. Nice pickoff by SortOf for a minimal commitment there. I mean, that was just, why not? Why not go for that attack on the 3rd base, make sure my opponent's paying attention, and he did get the sensor tower, so FanTaSy maybe taking a second too long there. Now, looking at the upgrade-wise, that does tell a story. These guys, they've been relatively equal this whole game. And eventually FanTaSy is going to be able to move out for something like a 2-2 timing, but eventually the upgrades do move further for Zerg because they just have more options. Adrenal glands is on the way. That's the big one for Zerg. Zerglings become very terrifying. Then we're on Hive, so Hydras are coming in. Eventually, the Terran really has to make the decision to move forward into something like Ghosts and Liberators and sort of the higher tech units, whereas the Zerg, they naturally progress there more because that's just what they want to get every time, whereas Terran tends to want to hit timing attacks more often. Looking at this right now, we've got just the creep continuously being denied. A drop actually gets shut down there. Those Marines on the north getting taken out. FanTaSy hoping to get some damage done, but not paying attention there. Eats some Banelings. Right now we do have FanTaSy moving forward, but he did lose those few tanks there. So looking at the units count right now, it's 6 tanks, a good chunk of Marines, but there is only 18 Banelings for SortOf. I was going to say, a lot of Marines isn't very good versus Zerg, but SortOf, he has been investing in a lot of other things. It's just the question is he eventually going to make a big swell of Banelings? Once he does, and there it is, there are the Banelings, which are going to make this a lot tougher for FanTaSy right now. FanTaSy is securing his 4th base, so he's not all in by any means. He may even start another CC or two, may start teching further. Got a fair few idle SCVs there, but for now he's just keeping the pressure on SortOf. He doesn't want to overextend because he knows this is a strong Zerg he's pushing into. And looks like that SortOf might not give FanTaSy the time. He's coming in from 3 angles here, going for an absolutely massive surround. FanTaSy going to have to react incredibly well. Marauders do tank a good number of the Banelings, more coming in, but they're a little delayed, so FanTaSy actually managed to hold that off. SortOf maybe a little bit gung-ho there, actually might have just cost himself this game. I mean, he's still got a good amount of units here. The Banelings are rolling forward. The question is, will they get the connections? No, they're all absorbed there. FanTaSy kites back a good number of their Marines there. SortOf types out there, and just such a quick end to that game. Very well played. So FanTaSy, I mean, he really capitalized on that there. I mean, he was slowly pushing out. That was no mistake for FanTaSy, getting himself into that position. And I don't think he would have expected Solar to go, SortOf, pardon me, to go in so aggressively there, but he did. And FanTaSy, if he was maybe a more aggressive or less experienced Terran, he would have moved forward, and that attack might have worked for SortOf, but very well reacted by FanTaSy. And now we're getting on into the next map, which is going to be Lost and Found. I mean, SortOf spending so much time building up there for him just to know that it's over, because FanTaSy was very close to him, and he didn't manage to clean it up. He sort of overcommitted, I guess. Maybe he thought he needed to deal with it before he got choked out, and maybe he did. But, yeah, thanks everyone for tuning on in. Thank you for the 1-star balloon, Wex 10. But we're moving on forward now. We'll get into the next game. Keep in mind these are best of 5, so we're going to have a lot of StarCraft today. I'm going to try not to throw my voice out right at the start there, but it's hard not to when the games are like this. Should have checked how many queens died at the end of that game as well. But we're getting the players into the lobby here. Both these guys are ready, and there's no reason for us not to jump on in. So we're loading into the next map, which is Lost and Found. But great to see so many of you guys tuning in to this tournament. Now, Lost and Found, it can really go both ways. I mean, I think we'll have a pretty similar game to the last one, honestly, judging from the previous series that these guys had as well. But, hold on while I get this sorted. There we go. Spawning up in the top right-hand side of the map, it is SortOf. Let me make sure I've changed the overlay there. Oh, ho, ho. I almost did it again, but we're making that a habit to check that. Spawning up in the top right-hand side of the map, it is SortOf. And spawning down the bottom left-hand side of the map, it is Dead Pixels FanTaSy. I mean, he capitalized on that. FanTaSy was sort of just checking all of his boxes there, and that was not the most aggressive push. It's not like FanTaSy was stimming forward with the Marines trying to bait SortOf into that attack, because SortOf was scary. He was a Zerg that was reaching tier 3, but maybe just went a bit too soon with not quite enough units. Overlord scouts moving out there. So as far as this series go, FanTaSy starting the lead, but it was a close series last time, so we'll just have to see what SortOf's going to do. I mean, not changing his opening or anything drastic like that, which is good to see. He's confident in his play. I mean, probably 99 out of 100 games there, he doesn't overcommit like that and the game goes longer, because FanTaSy, he was sort of teching. I mean, he did want to get damage done with that army, make no mistake, but I don't know if he was super ready to be able to do that. I mean, SortOf had the Vipers. I'm honestly not sure if I saw those in the fight there. But yeah, we're in the next game now. Reaper moving on out for FanTaSy here. Scouting out with an SCV, making sure there's no proxy hatch or anything. Or, pardon me, completely wrong side of the map. Ignore me. So, actually trying to block that third base there. I'd say it's still early, but it's 6 o'clock here, as that's the time that generally works better, as most of these players are indeed in Korea. So we've got the Reaper poking on in there. Just got a Zergling last game. He's bruising up some of these drones, but that Queen's going to pop out, shoo that Reaper away. But for now, he has denied the third base, just that SCV being there, and FanTaSy has been playing it sort of somewhat safer, I guess, not going for as quick of the third base. That Reaper is continuing to poke. Just by being there, it can deny the third base. SortOf is going for that. FanTaSy's already thrown his grenade there, but going to try and deny it a little bit more, but that's as long as he's going to be able to deny it. Third base goes up, and the game moves forward. Now keep in mind that last game opened up with FanTaSy. He sort of suicided 4 Hellions in the Reaper there, which was quite a big commitment, and that's why he wasn't really in a position to get too much done there. I mean, he did open up macro. It's not like he went for a strong timing or anything. Now, he is going for a Viking this game, so we're going to see what he'll do with that. If it is going to be to do something like cover up a follow-up Banshee, or just because he wants to make sure SortOf has no vision. But as far as this game goes, nothing really decisive out of FanTaSy yet. Going for this Hellion, so it will likely be a third CC. Doubt it's going to be a Hellbat push. I mean, I could be wrong. There we go, he starts the tech lab. So yeah, not likely going to be a Hellbat push. Actually going to be a drop, though, with this starport. Now, the Overlord for SortOf will get in. It is going to see that that starport was producing. The question is whether he did see that or not. He's been busy with FanTaSy poking on the front. FanTaSy not throwing these units away this time. Now, an Overlord has gone down. And interestingly enough, an armory is on the way, so it will be a sort of later Hellbat push from FanTaSy. Not rushing towards it, but maybe going to be going with a Hellion drop or something along those lines. Yeah, this Viking's moving in to clear that out. And then here we go. So we're going to see how this attack's going to work out. He's starting a Raven, FanTaSy is. Interesting. The question is, will he start Stim? Or will he be going into mech from this position? But for now, we do have to worry about this. Viking gets another Overlord, and nicely done. Sort of sees the location of the units there, so he can plan his drop accordingly. Creep being denied a little bit. So here comes this drop. There's an Overlord, which will maybe see this. It will indeed. So this drop will be seen. The Viking didn't clear that to the north. Now, FanTaSy's going to have, or SortOf's going to have to react, pardon me, but these are actually Hellbats, not a Hellion run by. And now it looks like that SortOf's going to be getting pressured from 2 angles. There's 5 Queens at the third, though, so he should be fine there. But he's really just got these Lings here to try and deal with these Hellbats. They're getting us around. Now we're going to see, is FanTaSy going to micro this to pull these units back? One of the Hellbats goes down, but this Medivac keeping the others alive. 2 of them remain. Look at that, those Hellbats just tanking so much thanks to the Medivac. But it looks like this attack is getting shut down there. At the third, the Queens have burned through a lot of energy, but they're standing strong. FanTaSy's not going to get anything for that commitment. Medivac comes down to land on these Queens. They're a little bit out there. I mean, now it's just the Reaper and a Hellbat, but yeah, FanTaSy overcommitting a little bit. Going to lose the Medivac, which is quite an expensive loss. And looking at this now, he's got his third up. He's got his Raven. Ooh, that's not a complete wall. You need to fix that, FanTaSy. You're playing versus Zerg. I think all Terran players know the struggle, though, trying to get that front wall up with the CC in it. And he actually needs to be very careful here, not having that wall up. Now, FanTaSy is going into mech behind this. He's got the Raven. I doubt we're going to see Mass Raven. I guess the Raven's just a utility. Maybe going to see a double Thor drop from here on out. And there we are. That's going to be the follow-up play. Viking has gotten 3 Overlords and no damage done, but this was a bit of a commitment by FanTaSy. If he didn't go for something like that, he might have up more mech production sooner, or maybe have his third base established a little bit sooner, but he's not in a terrible situation. He did force some units out of SortOf, however, SortOf will be reaching this comfy Zerg stage relatively soon. You will have to worry about this Thor drop that's coming in, though. Creep spreading out for SortOf right now. He's making a lot of roaches. This looks like a safety number. He's getting the roach speed. He does have a lot of open supply though, and now he's going into Swarm Host, so I guess he has identified that this is mech, seeing that there was still Hellions, and yeah, I guess that's just enough for him to figure that this is mech. It's not bio. The Thors are looking around. We're going to see how FanTaSy is going to react now. Thors are actually landing at the 4th base, popping these drones off here. 4 drones gone down so far. We're going to see if he'll go for the hatchery or not. Picking off an extractor. It looks like maybe going to get a queen or 2. Roaches, not a good answer to Thors with medivacs, as the Thors just lift off and they're going to now be going to the main base. SortOf's going to have to split his army here. FanTaSy is opting to trade with these roaches and queens though, as opposed to going for much other damage. Now he's going to unload, try and pick off that queen, then load back up. Not much anti-air here for SortOf, so this is going to be a bit of a pain. Getting disrupted by this. He does have the good number of roaches though, which will help. But Hydras are on the way, and then there's the Swarm Hosts that were made. Just a small number, 6 in total, which are now going to be able to harass. But there's a good number of Hellions here, which are actually going to catch the Swarm Hosts. Now FanTaSy knows about that. We'll see if he's paying attention. Actually, Locust getting on top of these Hellions. This is actually a big loss for FanTaSy here. I mean, it does take production time, and you can't afford to be throwing away units just this early here. So if FanTaSy loses a few Hellions, we'll see if they're going to transform or something like that. The Thor drop keeping SortOf busy though, but these Hellions are going to be diving into the natural. There's a Spine Crawler there, and actually the Hive, which FanTaSy is going to scout. We'll see if he controls these, maybe gets a shot or 2 off. Sees more Swarm Hosts popping there. It was actually just a Swarm Host popping. Or no, there's 11 now, pardon me. Now, attack upgrades are on the way for FanTaSy. He's going to be heading into 2-1. SortOf on 1-1 for now. He's looking to go into more tech and eventually harass with Swarm Hosts. Now, Swarm Hosts can be very good versus mech. I mean, Terran players sometimes do get torn apart by these, and it does hurt mech a little bit. Now we'll see, are these tanks going to unsiege? Okay, so the Locust's not getting right on top of this here. No units going down so far. A few more Hellbats would be good to be with this army to buffer for these units, but the tanks and Thors should be able to deal with this for now. It's not reaching that critical mass, and FanTaSy's in position to intercept this. Now, we're going to see if SortOf's going to sort of 1-2 this. 4th base turning into a planetary may be very exposed here. I mean, this army just needs to move in, but FanTaSy is moving in to intercept this, and this is where it gets tough for the Terran player. He's trying to defend 2 locations at once, and if one of them is not defended enough from the Swarm Host, that's where it will really begin to snowball. Double Liberator moving out, so FanTaSy keeping the harassment on for now. We'll be able to hit this north base if he knows that's there, and he does. So we'll be able to harass that, or is he just going right by? There we go. And he's actually going towards the 5th base. Going to shut down the gas mining of SortOf, which is mainly what these bases are for. Double sensor tower up, giving FanTaSy a lot of vision. He's now quite secured in this position. Now he's going to be moving out. He's almost maxed out, and the army of SortOf isn't that scary versus mech. It's a lot of roaches, it's Swarm Hosts. And when it comes to an army like this, a mech army with 2-1 can really shred through Locusts and things like that. That Raven helping clear up this creep very easily. Hunter-Seeker missiles going down. Or anti-armor missiles, not Hunter-Seeker missiles anymore, pardon me. Siege tanks getting set up. Vipers actually get a fantastic blinding cloud on the Thors, which are caught. More tanks getting sieged up, and it's actually a full surround here, so FanTaSy may have overcommitted a little bit. Those roaches and hydras taking a lot of damage there from that anti-armor missile. The Thors are actually going to pick off a fair few of them, but it looks like they will go down. Medivac coming in. Will it save the Thors? One of them will get saved. It's actually a close fight here. Those Thors being so strong to help clean this up, but SortOf did manage to hold on. Those Vipers getting in position right in time. Then the Swarm Host did manage to get a good surround there, so nicely done getting around FanTaSy there. FanTaSy, I'd like to see him throw up a few more CCs back at home. He's got the money for now. Although it looks like he doesn't want to take this game too long with how aggressive he is being. Greater Spire is out as well, so eventually he's going to have to deal with Broodlords, which can be very tough. He's heading into Ghosts, which will help with that, but this is what I'm talking about. The Swarm Hosts get in, they're going to force this base to lift off, which is one option Terran can use to deal with this, and now he actually is going to push in. Tanks are getting sieged up. Lots of Hellbats to buffer for this. Needs to be careful, though, not to overextend. These Hellbats, that buffer is being worn thin. Now, FanTaSy is able to push in only because he saw that that Swarm Host wave was used up, but there'll be another one relatively soon, and that's what he's going to have to worry about. He may just have to evacuate. I mean, these Locusts are going to hit these tanks hard. There's nothing else joining up with this to help. And honestly, once this army's wiped out, it'll put FanTaSy in a very tough situation right now. He's down on supply, and he's about to lose a lot of units here. SortOf going in for it right now. FanTaSy's got no choice but to retreat. Hydra's picking everything off. The Swarm Host just helping clearing it all out. Liberators peel off to go and try and get some harassment done, but FanTaSy on a very, or sort of on a very good economy, pardon me. FanTaSy stuck on 4 bases, still back at home. Not really stuck. I mean, 4 bases is 4 bases, but his situation is not getting any better as this game goes on. He's failed to kill SortOf multiple times now. Going for some Liberator harassment, once again, nicely done. Viper's building up more energy, and I imagine after that there will be another attack coming in relatively soon. Ghosts are coming up for FanTaSy. That's where he's spending his bank. I would like to see another command center or something along those lines. Swarm Hosts come in, pop off 3 siege tanks, which is absolutely massive there. Tanks moving in, chasing these Swarm Hosts away, but they'll be back for sure. And there's the Broodlords. There's only 3 for now. Another one building, but FanTaSy's going to have a tough time dealing with this. He's making 4 Ghosts. He's already got 4 out, making a Viking. But it's very tough for a meching Terran to deal with this. There's the Vipers he has to worry about. There's the Swarm Hosts. There's the Hydras. You need tanks to deal with the Hydras realistically. Ghosts to deal with the Broodlords. And then Hellbats to deal with the Swarm Host. And really, all those units don't really help with anything else. I mean, they're very specific in what they have to deal with. So FanTaSy trying to get a good balance with this, but he's been pushed off his 3rd base now. So his economy is not in a great spot. He's down on supply. Just after failing to hit those attacks, he's going to be in a very tough spot. Looks like that SortOf forcing the siege. Now the Locusts are coming in. The Hellbats, there's tons of them. They do melt through that. The Ghosts want to try and get snipes off on this. The Broodlords are in position, though. 4 Ghosts getting abducted there. Snipes going down on the Broodlords. It may be enough to clear this up, and I think it will be. So the air army is going down, but 6 Ghosts went down to deal with those Broodlords, and the economy is not very good for FanTaSy. He's just bleeding off supply and SortOf got a nice bank back at home. Ghosts are miracle workers, but I'm not sure if at this spot in the game. The next wave of Locusts is actually not going to have too much to contend with it here. Another CC is up, which can be floated over eventually, but looking at this, the Locusts now getting on top of the tanks. Mass Lings coming in here for SortOf, and these Ghosts are good, but not that good. We're going to be having a 1-1 series for now. Command Center goes down. FanTaSy, it's one of those timings here. Abduct going down on one of the few remaining Ghosts there. I mean, we have the FanTaSy GG timing for a reason. Half the supply of SortOf, I guess, just remaxing, going to be coming on in. I mean, he's making 2 drones. He's like, what else now? I guess I'll go kill him. Here comes in those Swarm Hosts. They've certainly had their value this game. Looking at the resources lost, this is an example of the style of mech in that bottom right. Hydra's coming in, picking everything off. Siege tanks, FanTaSy. He's defending his main, but I'm not sure what else. Here comes in the Swarm Host. I think that's got to be the end of it, right? GG gets called. It's a tied series, 1-1, sort of. Not going down without a fight. And that was another one of those longer games, but sort of managed to hold those attacks just fine. He played the game that he wanted to play. Alrighty, we'll be getting into the next game here. The next map, Dreamcatcher. Thanks to everyone for tuning into this event. We're already having a great series so far. Alrighty, well, we're getting these guys into the game. Alrighty, both these guys are ready. We're getting into it. Sorry if you're just staring at my face for a minute. There we go. But we're loading into the next game, a Dreamcatcher. Thanks to everyone for tuning on in. Personally, I'm happy either way, whoever advances. But I'm sure these guys each have their own opinion on the matter. Spawning up in the top left, it is SortOf. And spawning down the bottom right-hand side of the map, it is Dead Pixels FanTaSy. And when I say I'm happy with whoever advances, I mean there's always the hype. SortOf coming in, managing to bring down FanTaSy in a rematch from their last match would always be exciting. But then there's always the Terran bias. FanTaSy is the Terran hope in this tournament. We've got a lot of Zergs, we've got a few Protoss, and then we've got FanTaSy. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That hatchery first, not even really worth commenting on. And now FanTaSy, he went bio first game, mech second game. I feel as if Dreamcatcher is more of a bio tank game. I mean, bio tank game. Yeah, we know how this map works out with these cliffs and ledges and whatnot. Greenberry saying, very excited for Raynor. You're not the only one. I think him versus Creator will be a fantastic match. CC on the way for FanTaSy there. Standard Reaper stuff. Third hatch on the way for SortOf. Dreamcatcher getting the third base. Not the most difficult task. Not the most difficult task in the world. Fourth base, relatively safe. I mean, Zerg players do have to be very aware of the pushes on this map. But then beyond the fourth base, it can be very tough. I mean, we don't see that many games go that far on this map. I mean, certainly there have been some big ones, but Terrans generally do go for a push on this map. Zerg players generally just veto this map or don't want to play on it, but so far we're seeing FanTaSy be very safe with his Reaper here, not bothering to poke out. And doing that, it's not like he went for his Marine to shoo the Overlord away this time, actually making a single Hellion. We'll see if he cancels that. Okay, so this is sort of screaming Hellbat push here. Double Marine on the way, Hellion on the way as well, a single Hellion, and then a Starport. So yeah, this is screaming Hellbat push, unless I'm mistaken and this is some build I haven't seen. Or maybe he's just really trying to mind game his opponent. There we are, yeah, double Marine pops out. Floats over the factory, and then I imagine he'll make a Medivac out of the Starport and start an armory at some point. Another Marine on the way, yeah, the Marines are likely going to load up into that Medivac. The Hellbats will move out and transform. So FanTaSy going for a very, very well-known push. I mean, just really anything with Hellbats, but I personally am a big fan of the variant with the Medivac. I mean, it just gives so much utilization, and we saw him open up with some sort of this in the last game. Not with the Marines, though, in the previous game. And that was sort of more of a 1-2. I think this one's going to be more of a direct push, most likely. So we're just going to have to see how is sort of going to react to this. I mean, he came in, he saw the one Hellion being made. I don't think he saw the actual Hellion, but then he saw the double Marine being made. But I mean, he saw the Starport, he saw everything else, so there's only so much that this can be. I mean, what else could this be? So I assume that SortOf's going to be aware that this is incoming. Here comes in the Marine drop, those 3 signature Marines there. Got to be careful not to take too much damage on the Medivac. SortOf actually focusing that down, nicely done. We'll see if FanTaSy's going to get too much. Yeah, he's taking a lot of damage on this Medivac. Actually loses one of the Marines there. And he's taken so much damage on the Medivac. And now he's got these Hellions to the north there, but he's waiting on the Hellbats. Following this up with a Banshee and Cloak. But SortOf has all the information here. And just the amount of damage on that Medivac, that was... I think that's pretty much just doomed this push here from FanTaSy. I mean, look at this Medivac. There's 4 Queens. They're just going to destroy that Medivac. Medivac's there. The Marines are unloading. They'll add a bit of DPS. FanTaSy may just be going for drones here. SortOf is pulling them. Lings are going to get a wraparound here. That Medivac is staying very far back. Hellion working on a drone or two, but looks like these Queens will be enough to defend this. That Medivac gets out. It has no choice. Picks up a Hellion, and this attack pretty much just got shut down completely there. Very well played by SortOf, just identifying that. Maybe not the best push on this map from FanTaSy. Maybe should have aimed for something with tanks, but we'll just have to wait and see. He is going for the mech follow-up. I mean, I think Biotank is the better choice on a map like this, but with the opening he did go for mech. It can be a good follow-up. And he did almost have SortOf dead in that previous game, but SortOf played very well versus this. So we'll just have to see how this next game is going to go. SortOf getting into this 4th base. The single Banshee has been made. Oh, actually, never mind. Look at this. He's made 2 Banshees, pardon me. First Banshee's out, second just popped. But Hyperflight Rotors is on the way, which is very interesting. So he's going to be opting for these speed Banshees, so FanTaSy is not going to stop churning out these Banshees. And now we'll see. It really depends how SortOf's going to react. I don't imagine there's a world in which he skips the Hydralisk Den. But if he does make a large number of Roaches and goes for an attack, Mass Banshee, I mean, it's a pretty good answer to Roaches. So just Roaches still in the way for SortOf, and so this could actually work out incredibly well for FanTaSy. Look at all the, I mean, we'll see. SortOf is just making Roaches. It's not looking like a big push, but 10 more on the production tab. Yeah, this is, I think, more than safety Roaches. He's going to want to counterattack. So really the question is FanTaSy going to identify this and wait till he's at like 5, 6 Banshees? And I mean, if SortOf moves out, like, there's only just 2 tanks coming out now, but the Banshees will just shred into this. Yeah, 1 or 2 Banshees takes a while to kill Roaches, but FanTaSy is up to 4. Hyperflight Rotors is just going to be finishing right now. Looks like SortOf's getting ready to move out. I believe he'll probably just cancel his move out when he does see these Banshees, and this is a single Starport Banshee play, but it looks like that it's going to be a Roach Ravager all in. The Banshee's coming to the north, though. They're cloaked, so they're not going to be seen for now. Queen's going to get sniped off there. 4 actually going to be going for the hatchery here. I was wondering, 4 is not really enough to kill a Spore Crawler, but now we're seeing a double attack. Both of the outer expansions for SortOf are being picked off right now. There's no Queens really with this push. There's a single one, so it looks like that SortOf may actually lose 2 of his bases and be committed to an all-in that will eventually be cleaned up by the Banshees. However, the question is, how much damage can he get done? Those tanks, I believe, were unsieged there. Another Banshee pops out. It's going to have a lot of work to do, but we're going to see. I believe these Banshees should be coming home from FanTaSy, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there we are. They're already home. Hyperflight Rotors. It's hard to keep track of. SCVs are certainly going to go down here, but FanTaSy loses a Banshee to the Corrosive Ball, but as long as he's careful, he shouldn't lose any more. More Corrosive Balls raining down there. SortOf just trying to get anything he can. 3 Queens with Transfuse may be enough to shut this down, and if he can do that, he can take this game. The third base is under a lot of damage. These Banshees really do need to be repaired here, so these Queens can go down. That Siege Tank was focusing down that Queen. These Banshees do need to be repaired, though, if they are going to contest these Queens. Cloak is on them, but Transfuse going down. There's only 2 Banshees left. I think SortOf, he may have done it. Those Banshees, the Queens were enough to contest them, and now FanTaSy's in a lot of trouble right now. SortOf, though, only on 2 bases, is all in. He's making more Roaches, but the Queens did go down to those tanks on the high ground, so these Banshees will force it back, and now we're in an odd situation. I mean, this isn't a average StarCraft 2 game. 43 SCVs went down. These Banshees with Hyperflight Rotors chasing down those Roaches and Ravagers, and out of all the games for SortOf to skip a Hydralisk Den, this is one of them. Ling's going for a bit of counterattack, SortOf just saying, well, I guess. He's now going for a Spire, double hatchery on the way. Income for SortOf is still much higher. He's got that natural that's been mining, whereas FanTaSy lost a lot of workers. He's now just resaturating all of his bases here. Now, the Spire is going to be the big question here. Is FanTaSy going to identify this and react? Really, he'll just need a Thor. 1 or 2 Mutalisk will shut down basically all the Banshees, and then, but will they end the game is the question. Will FanTaSy make a Thor? He's making a missile turret. Actually, to react to this Overseer, we'll see if that's a wake-up call here, that he's going to need some anti-air. Is there going to be a Thor on the production tab? That 1 missile turret. Okay, SortOf actually paying attention, though, sees this. And now I am concerned for FanTaSy here. No Thor is on the way. He's only now just moving out with the Banshees. I mean, if he sees that there's not much else, he's got to be thinking, you know I've got Banshees, so you've got to be making some anti-air to deal with them, right? Now, with the Banshees are coming in, we'll see what they're going to get. A few drones here and there, very nicely done, as he does need to do damage to the economy. I think he's going to see the Spire now. 10 Mutas are on the way. There we are. Banshees are going to try and get everything they can, but eventually their days will be numbered. Queen goes down, nicely done. More and more drones falling, so this is very nice from FanTaSy, getting some utilization with these. Queen's forced to move to safety, but some drones will be picked off here. One of the Banshees goes down, but may be able to get the Queen. Mutas pop out, though, and that's the end of those Banshees. However, FanTaSy did have enough of a warning here, so Thors will be on the production tab. A missile turret at each base should be getting started. There we go. He's got a good spread of them now. Really, a Thor and a missile turret with SCV repair can kill any amount of Mutas. But we're going to see FanTaSy is going to have to defend here. He's got a siege tank. Looks like that's going to get picked off there. Missile turret is up. Not a huge number of Mutas, but they may be able to get some damage here. FanTaSy needs to repair that turret. A Thor getting some shots off from the high ground, but other Thors are only now just popping, and these tanks are all pretty exposed, but sort of having a tough time finding an angle, splitting up those Mutas, but he's actually going to lose a fair few of them to these missile turrets. 3 of them get out. 15 drones have gone down while all this is going on. Pardon me for not catching that. I imagine that was a Hellion run by. Now, looking at this, some SCVs went down, but this is such a scrappy game. This is the sort of foreigner versus Korean we all love to see. Thor with a medivac going to be pushing this all back. There's a good number of Roaches, and this is an exposed Thor here. Ravagers are starting up. There's no Banshees to defend this anymore, so it is going to be ground versus ground. FanTaSy does have 2-1. It's 2-1 versus 2-1, but these tanks will pack a punch. These Ravagers actually misrallied there. One of them goes down. This Thor may be able to react and pull back. Actually gets Corrosive Belt down. That's an expensive loss. However, on this side of the map, Hellions getting more damage done. Sort of not having much luck recuperating his economy. Those Ravagers misrallied again, eating more tank shots. And most of the other Roaches went home. These players, they're equal on supply now, but FanTaSy seems to have recovered better with sort of going for those Roaches and then not being able to come back. A single Banshee looking for something to get done, but this one Mutalisk and Overseer will shut it down. 7 Swarm Hosts are on the way. They found a lot of success for sort of in the previous game versus Mech. This game we'll just have to wait and see. Hellions picking off drones, 3 gone down so far, 4. And sort of, he's lost a lot of drones this game. We've seen 57 go down, a lot of those to Hellion harass. The Banshees got their share too. And I think FanTaSy may go for a push at some point, and he's actually moving out now. He's got a 4th CC on the way, so he's not necessarily all in, but this is a strong Terran mech army. He's also going for 3-2 as well. Does he have Blue Flame, though? He doesn't have Blue Flame, so these Swarm Hosts may be able to get something done. We're currently seeing 11. There's going to be 14 for SortOf. Swarm Hosts are relatively cheap units. These Banshees... we'll be able to go with the push, though, and help out in that regard. Counterattack being shut down. The Banshees there. They're on watch. The one Muta. Gonna have to help with that. Tank's getting sieged up. This Roach counterattack may just get shredded here. Banshees are coming in as well. So eventually this will be cleaned up. And now we're going into another wonky base trade. Sort of settles for the 3 tanks and is going to run out. He's now going to have to deal with this attack. Looks like that one Locust wave was absorbed there by FanTaSy. And here we are. It wouldn't be a game on Dreamcatcher without those tanks sieged up behind the rocks there. A lot of units for sort of eating tank shells, and this base being choked out could be the end right now. Supply is relatively even here. However, the Swarm Host being picked off by these Banshees. These Banshees having such high value here for sort of, or for FanTaSy, pardon me. A counterattack is going down as the Banshees aren't here to help clean that up, but the CC, as long as it's lifted, will be fine. FanTaSy going to be in a lot better situation back at home than sort of is right now. He's going to have to react to this Locust wave going down, but it's just Roaches and a handful of Locusts that are going to have to deal with this. Look at all these tanks. GG gets called. FanTaSy going to be the player who leaps forward. So it's currently 2-1 in this series, and now we're getting into the next map. Dreamcatcher, I'm pretty sure that was FanTaSy's map pick. Next map is going to be Blue Shift. Now we'll see, is FanTaSy going to take it again, or will sort of bring us to another ace match with these guys? And then keep in mind, after this series, don't go anywhere, guys. After this, we're going to have Solar versus Haas. So we're getting these guys into this lobby here. We're getting these guys in. Alrighty, but they are both ready, so we're going to get on into it. Thanks to everyone for tuning into Afreeca World. It's great to see so many of you guys are enjoying this StarCraft. Feel free to leave a 1-up on the stream, leave a favorite, anything like that. You can follow me on Twitter at LaughNgamez. And big thanks to Afreeca for sponsoring these events. Now, Blue Shift. This map, FanTaSy, if I'm trying to think back to their past series, FanTaSy, I believe, ended up encroaching on SortOf and just managing to push forward and sort of narrowly clinch the game. I'm not too sure, but either way, I already said his name. This guy spawning down the bottom left-hand side, Dead Pixels FanTaSy. Spawning up in the top right-hand side of the map, it is SortOf. So no early pools, no proxy racks just yet. These guys have a lot of respect for each other. Changing the overlay there, almost forgot. So I already did the introductions, you heard them. I promise for the next event I will look into getting a automatic scene switcher set up. Now, as I was saying, these guys have a lot of respect for each other, sort of going for the early pool. I mean, it's not disrespectful or anything, but he is going to be trying to catch FanTaSy off guard. Blue Shift is a smaller map, so the Lings will be able to get around. And we'll just have to see. FanTaSy, he's SCV scouted in the past. He's kept his Reaper at home in the past. And other times he's just sent his Reaper across the map and not made a safety Marine. So we'll just have to see. However he's feeling. He's played very unpredictable when it comes to countering the opening of early pools. Reaper on the way, and it looks like it will be an SCV scout, so this will help FanTaSy out. The 6 Lings are going to be on the way. And basically all this SCV is going to do, it's going to basically just let FanTaSy know there are going to be Zerglings coming, so we'll just have to pay attention with the Reaper. SCV could actually get caught by the Lings here. FanTaSy, or SortOf, now going to know that the cat's out of the bag. And look at this spread of Lings here. They're moving across the map. Oh, this is concerning. FanTaSy getting a bit baited here. Lings are moving across the map. This wasn't just 2. So these 2 Lings are going to go down, but there's more. But wait, there's more. FanTaSy not going to be too happy. He did kind of get baited by SortOf here. One of these SCVs is going to go down for sure. The other going to have to retreat. But the command center is going to be delayed, and another SCV going down. That's 2 gone down. FanTaSy is going to have to rely on this Reaper to clean this up, pardon me. SCV goes down, that's 3. And this wasn't a huge commitment from FanTaSy or from SortOf here. So he's looking good. He's not going down without a fight. And I mean, that was just like a 15 or 16 pool, if I'm not mistaken, from SortOf. So he got his damage done. FanTaSy, I mean, he did the right move to scout it, but didn't react appropriately. Once again, Cloaked Banshee on the way for FanTaSy. I mean, he had his success in that previous game. I mean, that was such a unique game. That was an amazing game. I'm glad we've got these guys back. When I was getting this event set up, I thought, oh, it's going to be the same guys facing off against each other. But I thought, no. Let's have a rematch. And it's not the same as the last series, that's for sure, but it's just as good. So this time we're seeing Marines being produced. It looks like it could be a Marine tank Banshee push. This is a bit old school or a bit more niche, but it certainly can get the damage done on a map like Blue Shift. A push like this will hit the timing a bit differently than a Hellbat push. It will hit a bit differently than a 2-1-1. So whether SortOf's going to be prepared for this is the question. Now, one of these Banshees is going to be moving out. There's going to be Cloak. Lots of Marines are in position. Now, those are going to be purposely shown to the Overlord by FanTaSy, so maybe he's mind gaming here, and he starts a command center, so okay, maybe he is just going to be playing safe and not going for something like a Banshee tank push, as he has stopped production of those, gone for a 3rd CC instead. This Banshee is actually in a lot of trouble here. Cloak finishes up, so it's going to be able to work on these drones. It took a fair bit of damage, though, as the Queens were in position, but a few drones will go down, so a bit of a payback for the start of the game here. FanTaSy does need to focus down, but it's tough when the drones are all clumped up like that. 5 gone down so far. 6, 7 in total. Banshee does go down, so that is a loss there for FanTaSy, but he did get some good damage done there. 7, it's pretty acceptable. He's got his 3rd CC on the way. It looks like he is going to be playing Bio this game. Sim should be starting relatively soon. There we are. So it's going to be a Bio play on this map. I think that's a very good plan. Bio tank, very strong. Lots of chokes, very close. Not the most mech map with how close this is. I mean, Swarm Host could be launched from the Zerg's natural and pretty much hit the Terrans. So FanTaSy making a good choice on this map, I think. Banshee coming in, picking off a few rallying drones very nicely. SortOf having to deal with this, not going to be too happy. This Banshee looking for anything it can get, creep tumor included. Double eBay has been shown. +1 Carapace on the way for the Zerg, 1-1 on the way for FanTaSy. Looking back at SortOf's base here, he does have another Evo chamber on the way, so he shouldn't fall too far behind in upgrades, assuming he starts his melee. And there we are. Now FanTaSy, he's got his 3rd CC up, he's floating it over right away, which is good to see. Eventually he'll have a medivac to clean up that Overlord. Actually, the Banshee comes in. Creep being spread out, SortOf on 4 bases now. He took a bit of economic damage done, but he's getting set up now. Macro hatchery on the way. Creep spreading. Like 11 active tumors at once. Pretty crazy. Baneling speed on the way as well, so those banelings will help close the gap. And there is a fair bit of creep, so FanTaSy will have to clean that up before he pushes in. I say before he pushes in like he's going to, and I mean, looking at this, he's building up tanks. This is the sort of thing you do on a map like this. Medivac's on the way. It is going to be Marine tank, sort of the glass cannon style. It can either go so-so right for a Terran or so-so wrong, depending how they play. Medivac's moving out. FanTaSy's done well with his drops so far. But SortOf is teching up. He's got his Hydra den, so we'll be able to make Hydra soon. He's turning out Lings and Banes. Good creep spread so far. Looks like this drop will be intercepted here, though. FanTaSy needs to be paying attention. Gonna unload, get a creep tumor or two. Gonna have to pick back up. And he does so, not losing a single Marine. 2-2 is on the way for FanTaSy here, so he's not going super all-in or anything like that. We'll just have to see what he's going to do on this map, as this is a map in which I think Terran does want to get some damage done. Those Banelings are exposed. FanTaSy can land his Marines on those. Oh, not like that, though. Not like that. Ooh. I mean, if he sort of spread them out, that would have been good, but it clumped up a bit there. Another medivac drop moving out, going to clean up some creep. And this is sort of the push lane for Terran, so this is good to see FanTaSy cleaning this up here. We'll see if he has another scan. Doesn't look like it. Or there it is. Going to be cleaning that up. Wants to get that tumor there too. Trying to abuse the watchtower. Gonna have to get out of there though. Hydra's working away on these medivacs. Needs to be careful. Gonna have to go around somewhere. These medivacs are actually caught out just a little bit. There's not too many Hydras, but they're gonna have to go hide somewhere. And I don't know if they're safe in the bottom right. Well, not that close to the bottom right. Now FanTaSy, he's scanning all about, going for more drops. He's very good with these 2 sets of medivac drops. But he is building up in supply, and eventually he's going to want to push. He's making Liberators, he's getting 2-2, but he's not going to any further tech or any further bases. He's building up this Marine count, and it is just Marines, so SortOf's going to want a lot of Banelings, and he's making 23 more. He'll have 30. Medivac drop being chased away. Lots of siege tanks in position, though. These Lings eating a lot of shells there. Supply relatively even. This game could come down to one big push right now. FanTaSy should be banking energy, so he's going to be able to scan and go deep. And he is doing that. He's doing his best to clean up this creep. That's a lot of Marines. That's 4 medivacs full of Marines. Hydras and Banes coming in. FanTaSy needs to react. He does not want to lose all these Marines. Looks like SortOf actually going for a big surround. I mean, it's a bit disjointed here, though, so the attack on the right gets shut down. And FanTaSy manages to hold on there. He loses his supply depot wall, getting supply block. But now this is going to be his window here. He's making more tanks. He's heading into 3-3. He's got another CC on the way. But he wants to push this Zerg. And he should be doing it soon. Another supply depot wall starting up there. And now he's going to be moving out. There's not too many Banelings with this army. The tanks are going to be getting set up. FanTaSy actually securing his 4th base location, but I think he can go further. Tanks are now rolling forward. He's going to have to stagger them as he pushes onto this creep here, but he's got tanks in position at his 3rd base, so he shouldn't be vulnerable to a counterattack. Well, that's a fair bit of stuff coming. Hydra's actually going to work on these depots, being such a nuisance. Right now, these guys, they're multitasking as hard as they can here. FanTaSy getting up his 4th base, but that's an afterthought right now. I think he does want to push. I mean, he's positioned very aggressively here. I think he may just be waiting for some reinforcements. Although, SortOf, he's had a lot of time bought. He's reaching adrenal glands. He's reaching 3-3. And that's really where the upgrades for Zerg tends to outshine the Terran. Right now, FanTaSy, he's got so many tanks, though. I believe there might have been a Viper. There's a single Viper, so FanTaSy needs to be careful in that regard. Can't have all his tanks clumped up. I mean, there's one Viper, good Blinding Cloud, all his tanks right now. Here we go, SortOf charging in, though. These tanks are exposed. The Viper's not with this army, and this is so many tanks here. They're shooting so much, but Banelings and Lings are going to get right on top of them, so that tank count going to be reset. FanTaSy going to have the Planetary Fortress to fall back to, but that was a pretty expensive loss for both players. Those tanks, charging into that many tanks, you're not going to get off scot-free no matter what. Particularly, I don't know where that Viper was, but he might have been sitting that one out. FanTaSy, both these guys still relatively even on supply. FanTaSy, I mean, he was positioned aggressively, but once again, let SortOf come into him. But looking at this, the creep spreading up on his front door. SortOf's reached the Zerg stage. He's on 5 bases now. FanTaSy, actually, these Marines, eating some nasty Baneling connections there. He's pushing once again. FanTaSy, a very good player with this sort of just Medivac bio. If he could just play Medivac bio, I think he'd be pretty happy, but SortOf not going to let that happen. He's investing in Broodlords now. He's investing in a good number of Hydra and Bane, and FanTaSy, I don't think he sniffed this out. He didn't even see the Viper, and eventually he's going to have to deal with these Broodlords. So there's 7 on the way. Stimmed bio in some cases can get on top of Broodlords and shut it down, but this is blue shift. With Banelings underneath, you're pretty much forced to confront it head-on. There's really only 2 attack paths to your opponent's side of the map, so counterattacking isn't really an option versus Zerg. And then these Broodlords, they're going to be able to get to FanTaSy's side of the map so quick since it is a small map. FanTaSy, he's not really producing much at all. He's maxed out on this Marine style. He's going to go forward. He sees a Broodlord, though, so now he knows. We'll see if a Ghost Academy starts or some more starports or something, but it's going to be very tough. SortOf also has invested in some Brood or Infestors here. His 3rd base is now being attacked. There is enough reinforcements to deal with this, but 16 SCVs have gone down. That might actually help FanTaSy, freeing up some supply there, as he will need a very strong army to deal with this. He's moving forward, but there's a few Banelings here. The Marines may be able to get on top of this. The Marauders stimming forward to try and clear the way there. 9 drones going down while all this is going on, but another counterattack coming in. FanTaSy doing a good job defending his 3rd base so far. I mean, he took a bit of damage, but it hasn't been forced back. However, this game, I don't think it's getting any better for FanTaSy. I mean, yes, he's going into Vikings, but no ghosts or anything like that. SortOf's tacking up further. He's getting attacked for his Hydras now. He's getting air flyers attack. Eventually, it's going to be very tough to contest the air army of SortOf here. He's reaching that late game Zerg stage. Ghost Academy on the way, but the trouble is going to be for FanTaSy to build up to that number. I mean, he's got 4 bases, so he kind of has the money, but the question is he going to have the time? I mean, is SortOf going to give FanTaSy the time to defend this? Right now, 4 Infestors there. These fungal growths, are going to counter the clumped up bio, which is going to want to stim forward possibly. And sitting back isn't an option because Broodlord's pretty much the ultimate siege unit. Viper goes down, nicely done there. 4 Vikings are on the way at a time. There's only 3 Corruptors out. There's the 1 Viper. There's the Infestors, though. So we're just going to see what's FanTaSy able to do. I mean, he went for a nice drop to the south. I believe he may have killed the base or just cleaned up some creep there. This drop is going to be cleaned up, though. And FanTaSy is kind of running out of options here. These Broodlords, they could be exposed, and FanTaSy could get on top of them at some point, but for now he's just dropping. Look at that wall of creep there. Broodlords are actually pretty exposed right now. Well, there's 2 Infestors with them. So, not anymore. Ghosts have been being made, so FanTaSy has held on for quite a while now. I believe his CC might have been cancelled or killed or something along those lines, but eventually he will need a 5th base. Oh, there it is. It's flying north. Ooh, a Ghost actually going down. That's an expensive loss. These Broodlords, they're starting to cut FanTaSy off. Vikings are coming forward. He's got a decent number, but it looks like FanTaSy's going for a base trade versus Zerg, which is a pretty mad thing to do, honestly. He's got Ghosts and Vikings at home. If he can maybe... I mean, if he gets a good EMP off on the Infestors, that would help him greatly. But the Ghosts have been seen. He's not really paying attention to his army back at home. Infested Terran going down. Just a few there. Help with anti-air, I guess. There's a good number of Vikings here. FanTaSy is dealing some good damage to these bases. He wiped one of them. He's going to be going for another. But the question is, will he be able to hold on back at home? He's down on supply. Army supply is not too far off, but now he's feeling the wrath of the Infestors. I mean, he may be able to get all the Broodlords with these Vikings, but everything else is going to be the challenge. All these Infestors, oh man. EMP is going down on a good number of the Infestors there. It might be time for FanTaSy to go. Here comes in the Vikings. There's a lot of infested Terrans set up, though, already. Vikings get fungal growth. Infested Terrans so good versus air. And now FanTaSy's main base is in a lot of trouble. He's got a lot of Vikings, but it looks like his army on SortOf side of the map has been cleaned up. Well, at least shrunk down right now. The supply, I mean, it's a wacky game, but I think we may be going to game 5 in this series. Vikings are trying to clean everything up. And they may be able to deal with all these Corruptors here, and they will. So eventually the Broodlords could get cleaned up. Is SortOf going to clean this up? Or is FanTaSy going to clean this up? The army supply is not too different. Not many SCVs, but the army supply is pretty equal. Vikings cleaning up a lot of these Broodlords. Infested Terrans dealing a lot of damage to the Vikings, so they're going to want to get out of there. I mean, Infested Terrans deal so much damage to air. It's kind of ridiculous, but SortOf making good use of his tools right now. However, this clump of Hydralisks may just be enough. Oh, the Viking's going to land. Actually block some of those Infestors. Very nicely done. I mean, SortOf took an economic beating too. He does have a base in the bottom right, which could actually be as a lifeline here. FanTaSy, he's got his base up in the top right, and he's got mules too. Oh, but this base actually gets scouted. It's going to fly, but Hydras, they're going to be able to focus that down. Very nicely done. They may be caught out, though, if SortOf isn't paying attention. I mean, FanTaSy does need a fight sooner rather than later. He's got the Vikings, but they're not the best supply on the ground right now. The tanks are going to need to get sieged up. I think SortOf knows time's on his favor on his side with picking off that base. If he can bait SortOf into a bad fight. Liberators are here too. That'll help. They're going to have to be focused down. The Vikings need to land, and maybe should have landed a little bit sooner. But this fight's actually so close here. Is FanTaSy going to do it? I mean, he was in a lot of trouble, then went for the crazy base trade and managed to hold on back at home. Maybe just pulling SortOf apart, making it hard for him to focus there. Ling counterattack, shutting down the space, but it wasn't mining. FanTaSy's lifeline is this planetary fortress, which will eventually mine out. Liberator being a godsend, denying the space in the bottom right, which is actually so huge. However, it's going to be mining relatively soon again, and that's where the production's really going to benefit SortOf here. The supply is so low for both of these guys. Vikings, are they going to go to the main base and land? Or are they just looking for for overlords? Production, both these guys making a bit. FanTaSy's income is much lower, though. He needs to be so careful. He's actually finding a few overlords, but would have to find a lot more to supply block his opponent. And he needs to be careful not to lose these. FanTaSy's got this base mining now. His former third, I suppose. But these Vikings, they're kind of trapped now. We'll see. I mean, this might just have been enough to distract SortOf, though. FanTaSy's moving to the bottom right, and SortOf hasn't sniffed this out. The Vikings are going to land, avoid a parasitic bomb, get some harassment done on space, pull FanTaSy back. It looks like they may go down to these Hydras, or at least a lot of them will. But the space in the bottom right, FanTaSy's going for broke right now. He's going for the space. If he can get this, this is a huge economic blow to his opponent. If he gets the drones, that's even more. The tank's getting sieged up right now, and he has just enough bio, I think, in which SortOf isn't going to be able to just clean this army up right now. The drones are trapped too. A counterattack coming in. There's a bit at the third base for FanTaSy, but it's not going to be enough, so this base is lifted off. FanTaSy's income is less, but he's dealing blows to his opponent as well. Oh man, this game. And I was going to try not to throw my voice out in the first series. However, FanTaSy moving down. He's not stimming. He's not paying attention to his army here. This could be it. SortOf getting right on top of it. It's a lot of Hydras versus a lot of bio. There's a few medivacs healing this up, but it may just be too much here, and I think SortOf may have done it getting on top of that army. FanTaSy not quite paying attention, and now I think the supply gap is going to be a bit too much to recover from. FanTaSy trying so hard, but there's the GG scans going down on these bases. SortOf ties up the series here. Fantastic play there by our Swedish Zerg. I mean, it was close, but getting that base up, keeping it alive, and then just getting on top of FanTaSy there. If you guys remember how this first game started, SortOf sort of went for a ballsy attack and was caught out there, and this time FanTaSy getting caught out a little bit too. Or in that first game, I mean, these games are being really decided by these big moments here. Next map. Alright, I'm going to have to pronounce it. You'll have to forgive me for the butchery that is about to occur. It is Cerilin Fall. Alright, I said it. But, here we are. Thanks to everyone for tuning into this event. This is already a great match, or a great tournament, and it's only our first match. Keep in mind after this, we are going to be having Haas versus Solar, which is just another insane matchup. Make sure to leave a follow on the stream, thumbs up, whatnot, and then follow me on Twitter at LaughNgamez. That's where I post a lot of updates on the tournament. Both these guys are ready. No more time to waste. And now we're loading into the game. Cerilin Fall, it's one of the newer maps. And it's going to be the map in which this is decided on. I mean, for those of you that aren't aware, in the previous Afreeca world, these guys had a series, and it went to the ace match. And here we are. Once again, these guys clearly are a close match for each other. It's 2-2, spawning down the bottom left-hand side of the map. The Swedish Zerg, living and training in Korea. It is SortOf. And his opponent spawning down the bottom right-hand side of the map. It is FanTaSy for Team Dead Pixels. The Korean, the Terran Hope. It's going to be exciting whoever advances on. But this match, dare I say, I was kind of hoping for a little bit of cheese just for the ballsiness aspect of it. But another long one, I'm completely fine with that too. You'll have to forgive me while I had a drink there. Got a lot of StarCraft to cast today and tomorrow, but I'm excited for it. Spawning pool on the way for sort of not really newsworthy. Now, Surlin Fall, it is a larger map here. FanTaSy once again SCV scouting. If you guys remember how that last game started, FanTaSy was in a spot of bother at the start, losing 3 SCVs, having a CC delayed to a 16 pool, which is a very good opening for Zerg. So we'll just have to see. He's SCV scouting this time. Now, sort of not going for anything cheeky like that. FanTaSy maybe going to go block the third base, sort of. Has opted for very quick third bases, often in this game. Factory is the tech of choice, so we are not going to see a 2-1-1 in this series. Tech Lab on the way. And actually, there's that Reaper over there forcing a, what's the word for it? Spore crawler. There we are. Sort of getting a bit of or FanTaSy getting a bit of harassment there. You'll have to forgive me as I get tongue-tied a bit. Marine gonna be denying those scouting overlords. So far, the third base has been denied. Reaper gonna force those queens back. The longer he denies this base, the better. And that drone wants to go build a base, but FanTaSy not letting it so far. Needs to be careful. Oh, that Reaper taking a bit of damage there. It's not really going to be able to deny that any longer. Third base is up. Creep beginning to spread. Hellions are out, along with the Reaper there. So we'll see. The question is, we've seen our fair share of mech and bio in this series. Will it be mech or bio once again? Personally, FanTaSy, I think he's played very well with both styles. Losing a Hellion there to start off. Not the greatest start in this final match. Double Devo on the way for SortOf. Maybe going to be opting for a more ground-based Ling style. For now, though, he's done a good job defending, getting set up. Overlord going to go down to this one Marine. Going to see that it is going to be bio on the way for FanTaSy. FanTaSy opting for bio on this larger map. I mean, FanTaSy hasn't been overly aggressive this series, so a larger map may suit him well for playing bio. We'll just have to wait and see. For now, he's working on some of this creep. SortOf got his 1-1 on the way, so he will have an upgrade lead going into this series, or into this map, pardon me. FanTaSy tagging up. He's got his third CC almost done. I believe he'll probably float that over pretty quick as soon as it's done. You want to have a good macro start on a large map like this. The queen may actually go down. Something about FanTaSy and killing queens today. He's done rather well with it. Denying another tumor there. Another drone going out. SortOf playing it very greedy. Seeing what his opponent's up to. Opting for a fourth base. Well, it's not super greedy, but it's pretty bold. And that's just because he knows what his opponent's doing. He knows the time that a bio timing is going to hit. Third CC now floating over. FanTaSy, I imagine he'll start dropping once he's got his 2 medivacs out again. He's done very well with that so far. Oh, did he actually lose some of his Hellions there? Oh, he must have. SortOf producing Lings back at home. He's got his macro hatchery on the way as well. Baneling nest on the way, so he's going to be very safe, and eventually he's going to have a nice upgrade lead For a time, these drops will be dealing with 1/1 lings. Lair on the way. Double Medivacs moving on out. I imagine we'll see FanTaSy move out with another set of drops after this first group is done. Wanting to deny some creep coming in there. Nicely done there. Keeping SortOf on his toes. Spore Crawler in position for SortOf while just positioning there. Marine's gonna drop these lings, getting on top of them. 1/1 is finished for both players now though, so they are on even footing. 2 drones going down to a Liberator harassment. It will actually get the Queen nicely done, but will go down. FanTaSy trying to keep the harassment on. +2 on the way for FanTaSy. Has yet to start armor though. Doesn't want to be forgetting that. There we are, armor started. Here comes that second set of drops. FanTaSy very good at this multitasking, loading on up. Marines coming in once again. Creep going to be under fire. Scan gets used, but these lings going to force this army back. FanTaSy dropping right on top of creep, so SortOf is well aware of that. FanTaSy going to have to react and get out of there. Hydras are now out. They're going to be helping shut down these Medivac drops. FanTaSy, though, back at home. He's on his third base. SortOf's opting for a ling run by here. Now, I mean, SortOf didn't take the third base here. He opted for the closer natural one. He even has quite a nice wall with his barracks here. Large number of tanks, too. So he should be relatively fine from this unless the lings manage to run by, but this is a lot of tanks in position here. Banelings are starting up, so maybe an attempted bust here. Creep being denied once again. Active tumors getting picked off. FanTaSy needs to evacuate, though. Hydra's hot on his heels. This attack for SortOf likely prepared for when FanTaSy does a full move out. Now FanTaSy hasn't been too aggressive with his full moves out, which is very wise as a Terran. I mean, lesser Terrans would move out, get bopped by the Zerg, and then the Zerg would overwhelm them. But FanTaSy doing a good job just keeping the harassment on, showing an incredible amount of patience here. Flying on over with this army, may get caught here, needs to be careful. One of these Medivacs is very weak, opting to just try and get away from this army, it looks like. Gonna unload there at the back of here. These Marines will be able to clean up these lings, it looks like. Nicely done. Forcing them back. A cute dance going on between these two players as they face off right now. FanTaSy coming in for a very strong push this time. A lot of tanks. And there is no Vipers out just yet for SortOf. So FanTaSy hitting a very strong macro timing right now. He's just macroed up. He's been producing tanks bio constantly. The tanks may be sieged up a little bit late there. The bio needs to kite back from the Banelings. And FanTaSy getting pushed back, but SortOf getting a nice trade there. 15 SCVs going down to this counterattack that SortOf had prepped. Nicely done. And it looks like that our Korean Terran's in a lot of trouble right now. He gets a hatch. With some counterattack. Needs to be cleaning this up back at home, but 20 SCVs is massive losses here. And the tanks there maybe were just sieged a little bit too late. And this is going to put him in a tough situation right now. He does not have enough. He's going to have to get out of there. And these other two tanks are going to be forfeit, it looks like, shaving off a few lings. But this main army of SortOf is now going to be very tough for FanTaSy to rival here. He's being pushed back. He's doing his best to kite. However, 21 SCVs going down. A 3-base Terran can't really afford those losses. He's going to have to transfer some SCVs as he is oversaturated. And there he goes. FanTaSy going to have to work hard to come back, and I mean, he is a very good player. With these drops, he may just be able to do that. He's pushing to the north once more, but this other base, or I guess pushing to the south, he's kiting back. Needs to be very careful. These Hydras, if they get these Medivacs, that's just it. FanTaSy doing his best, looking for anything that he can get. He's producing units back at home. He's not in a terrible economic situation, but time is not on his side in this game. He's got 3-3 on the way, but SortOf's will be done sooner than his. SortOf will have adrenal glands. He's going to have vipers this time. And I think FanTaSy may be regretting that a little bit late of a siege there. Vipers are out. He's going to have to be very careful with these minivac drops now. FanTaSy's best hope may just be to max out and try and take a very good engagement here. He's going for another drop, however. With these Vipers, he could be in trouble. Gonna lose these 2 medivacs. And that's a precious supply, which is gonna hit FanTaSy hard. He's now stimming in. Scanning to clear up some of this creep. Wants to push forward. And he's gonna be doing just that. SortOf needs to be careful not to lose this chunk of army, though. We could be seeing a big surround or a big counterattack from SortOf here. 4 Vipers building up to full energy here, eating that hatchery. There's only 2 siege tanks in this army. So, I mean, the Vipers aren't going to be the most effective. FanTaSy's just going to have to work hard to pull this out with bio. 3-3, pretty much done for both of these guys right now. That counterattack's coming in, though. FanTaSy is going to be in a lot of trouble. His main mining base is now forced to lift off. The big fight's going down here. Blinding Clouds, the bio needs to kite back. A lot of Banelings done here. However, if FanTaSy can kite back, he may be able to make it work. SortOf's Banelings rolling in up a hill into a lot of nothing right now. FanTaSy may just have enough bio to stim forward, and if he's going to do it, he needs to go now. Before SortOf manages to remax, he needs to go, go, go. And he's going for it right now. He needs to get on top of his army. This is now or never. The reinforcements from the counterattack are coming back. He's going to pick off the base, but he needs more than that. He needs to pick off this army, however. I think it may not just be enough. And FanTaSy is going to try and get out of here. But it's looking like SortOf's going to have his vengeance from the past Afreeca world. FanTaSy's returning home, but the Lings are beating him there. He's got a bit of an army set up, but it's just going to be too much from SortOf. I think FanTaSy is going to be falling, and our Terran Hope's going to be eliminated right now, but SortOf playing very well, taking that fight, seeing an opportunity, and with that, he's going to take the series 3-2.